If you're feeling more confused than ever, then let's just come back to some basic principles like these 5 foundational food ideas and learning how to fast. And you will see so much change in your health just from those 2. The tool of a fasting lifestyle, I have seen people literally lose hundreds of pounds, change their cravings, improve their own health, and they get the win. It's a free alternative to Ozempic. The exciting piece of what's happening with those weight loss drugs is now people are realizing they make this within their own body. So now what are all the strategies they can do to make it? Hormones don't all have the same influence on our body. So the bottom of the hierarchy are these sex hormones. So estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. If you want to balance those hormones, the hormone you want to pay attention to is insulin. Above insulin is cortisol. You can't balance insulin if cortisol is hanging around all the time. But at the top, the master hormone is oxytocin. You start there, and all other hormones are going to balance.
Mindy, there are so many conflicting diets in the health space these days, from vegan to carnivore. We have our dietary guidelines that are in the mix, throwing more confusion in. For somebody that wants to follow some hearty principles that you could stand behind, no matter what diet they're consuming, what can we look at there?
Oh my gosh, I love this question because I feel the same thing. I feel like with all the information out there that people are more confused than ever, and especially women. So in Eat Like a Girl, I lay out the foundational 5. And these 5, actually, they work for both men and women, but these 5 are like your tried and true. If you follow these 5, you will not steer wrong. And the 5 is the first one, and the most important principle of food is that your blood sugar matters, calories don't. Now, I'm not saying that calorie counting doesn't work. I'm saying calorie counting doesn't work over time. I don't know a single human that's been able to keep themselves where they want to be with their health by counting the amount of calories they eat in a day, comparing that to the amount of calories they exert in a day. It is a broken system that gets a lot of women, especially in restriction. And they're like, oh, I need, and they get the low calorie diet. They get so heavily involved in counting calories, and it just becomes this dead end trail. So we need to focus on blood sugar and knowing if a meal is good for your blood sugar or not. So it's very first principle. Second principle is we got all into all this carb counting. And let's just take the counting of carbs out. And I'll tell you that the most important thing to do is to eat nature's carbs. Just ask yourself, did this carb come from the planet, or did it come from a plant a lab where they actually had to make the carb, like a potato chip or a cracker? Like, where did this carb come from? You know, an apple comes off a tree. A potato comes from the ground. Usually the carbs that come from nature do not have a label on them that you have to decipher. So rule number 2 is let's focus on nature's carbs, not human-made carbs.
I'm going to jump in before we get to 3, because there's already a lot to unpack here, and then we'll move into the others. Yeah. And the first 2 actually fit together because regulating blood sugar and carbohydrates are hand in hand. So in a general sense, you've said we want to stick with nature's carbs, regulate blood sugar, calorie counting or carb counting specifically. We don't want to go down that path.
Nope.
What does that look like in a practical sense then? How do we manage our macros, including carbs, to balance the blood sugar?
Okay, well, so ask yourself some questions. If you don't have a continuous glucose monitor, and maybe you don't have even a little handheld one, let's just look at it this simply. If we take those 2 rules, how do you feel after you eat? Do you have more energy or less energy? If you have less energy, there is a good chance that meal you put together was not right for your blood sugar. And there's a good chance that you ate an ultra-processed carbohydrate in that meal. So we want to be energized after a meal. We want to be mentally focused after a meal. We want to be our hunger to stop after a meal. Like there should be food should be fuel that allows you to go through the rest of your day. If that's not happening, then there's a good chance you didn't get the blood sugar down right, and there's a good chance you had too many processed carbs.
A piece I want to tie into this is something you bring up in the new book, having two different metabolisms.
Yeah.
So we have our fat burning metabolism, and then we have our other metabolism that is going to kick in once we consume calories, specifically carbohydrates.
That's right.
So let's bring that into this picture.
Yeah, so this was really interesting part of Fast Like a Girl is I introduced this idea that we really have two metabolisms. We have one that kicks in when we eat, and we call that the sugar burner metabolism, and one that kicks in when we go an extended period of time without food. And I call that the fat burner metabolism. So every single diet has failed you because all you've been trying to do is manipulate the sugar burner system. So what we did with Fast Like a Girl is we introduced this fat burner system for women and how to time it to their hormonal needs. Now, the goal is to go from one system to the next within a 24-hour period. So in Eat Like a Girl, what I'm really highlighting is when you wake up in the morning, there is a window in which you're fasting, a window of time, and then there is a window in which you're eating. And the goal of every day is to ask yourself, when am I opening up my eating window? Let's say you open up your eating window at 10. Okay, you're now in the sugar burner metabolism. How long are you going to stay there? So maybe I'll open my eating window up at 10 and I'll close it down at 6. That's an 8-hour eating window, which is that's a really easy one for most people to do. And then the rest of the time, you're not putting anything in your mouth. You don't want that blood sugar to go up. You can have water, you can have tea, but the idea then is when you close that window down, the eating window down, you're giving yourself enough time to metabolically switch and come over into the fasted state. So I'm wanting people to reorganize the way they think about their daily food. When are you opening up that eating window? That should be the question every single day.
And there's an underlying assumption, as you explain that when somebody opens up that eating window and they leave fat burning mode, that they're not going to actually be burning any body fat again until they close the window.
That's right.
But is there ever an instance where somebody is saying having 2 meals a day, say breakfast at 11 and then eating again at 6, the people in between there, depending on how metabolically healthy they are, ever get into fat burning mode?
Yes. So this is why principle number 1 is manage your blood sugar. Because if you eat smart things, and we'll talk about what those smart things are, so your blood sugar doesn't go really, really high, and you do that within an 8-hour window. I'm just using that as an example. And now you switch over and you have 16 hours that you're fasting. The body's burning fat, it's repairing itself, and then you eat again, but the food you eat is keeping that blood sugar low and you're switching back into sugar burner. You can still be burning fat in sugar burner if you keep blood sugar low. You get momentum. We just give them sugar burner, fat burner to help people understand that the first system, the sugar burner system, kicks in when you eat, and the fat burner kicks in when you fast, when you don't eat and you have to go at least 12 hours for that fat burner system to kick in. But you can keep the momentum. That's the whole point of Eat Like a Girl, is that what we saw with Fast Like a Girl was that so many people lost weight because they just started to understand that fasting, like they got what fasting did, but then they had this really dysfunctional relationship with food. So when they went back into eating, they were like lost. They didn't know what to do. And so they stopped the healing, they stopped the fat burning. What I want to do is help women understand you can fat burn in both of these systems if you understand the principles of food.
Well, let's talk about what some of the foods are that would be allowed once we're open in that eating window in the sugar burning metabolism that will allow us to still burn fat in that feasting period.
Yeah. Well, one of the biggest ones for women is fiber. Making sure you're getting plenty of vegetables, even some of the lower sugared fruits. Like you want to make sure that you've got some kind of fiber with every single meal. And the reason that's important is fiber will slow down the amount of blood sugar, how much blood sugar comes rushing into the system. It acts like a little bit of a stopgap. It stops it from having to be your blood sugar from rushing up too high. The second piece is you can then lean into like protein. Protein's having its moment. Everybody's talking about protein, like you said, and I love that. I love that it's a great, have protein with every single meal. If you want to count your protein, fine, just fiber and protein with every single meal. And then the third principle is fat. Make sure you have a fat with every single meal. If you're putting those three things together, now your blood sugar is staying very, very stable. You could throw a carbohydrate in there if you want, but I want to make sure that every meal has a fiber, protein, and fat. And now you are going to keep burning fat, even though you're in this other metabolism.
All right. Before we continue to move forward with what to do, let's talk about what happens when somebody isn't following these principles. They're, say, eating within a really wide eating window, spiking blood sugar throughout the day. Talk about what happens over time in the body when we're doing that.
You know what a good way to think about it is? What would happen if every day you got up and decided you were going to run a marathon? You were going to push your athletic endeavors over and over and over again. Eventually, the body is going to end up getting injured. So what's happening when we're eating all day long is we're never leaving time for rest and recovery. And that is how we ended up in this metabolic mess, is that we're eating all day long, never tapping into this fat burning system. And then we're eating these ultra processed foods that have our dopamine up, have our glucose up. These foods have obesogens in them that are hijacking our stem cells and causing our stem cells to start to make fat cells. So poor food quality, high chemicals, you need some rest and recovery. We've got to have rest and recovery. Now, let's say you decide, I don't eat those. I eat really well. Great. You might not need as much rest and recovery if you're truly looking at food like medicine. But most people aren't doing that. Most people are organizing their food decisions based off their taste buds. And those taste buds have been hijacked by a food system that has every bit of incentive to keep you coming back eating more. So we've got to really use fasting as this recovery tool so the body can repair itself and then go back into food. It's kind of even like sleep. What would happen if you just stayed up day after day after day? Your body wouldn't function as well. It's the same thing. We are not meant to eat all day long, every day. We need breaks.
Well, let's take it right down to the cell. So we're spiking blood sugar, blood glucose is high, insulin's high. Insulin is jamming glucose into the cell. The mitochondria gets overwhelmed. Talk about that process.
Yeah, so this one's really interesting, and there's a lot of directions we can go on this. But if you think about the cellular parts on the inside, those mitochondria, people are paying tens of thousands of dollars in the biohacking world right now to hack into these mitochondria. Well, the first thing to know is those mitochondria have two fuel sources. They need glucose and they need ketones. And those mitochondria make ATP, which is the unit of energy that you need to heal, to function. Those mitochondria also upregulate glutathione, which is what will coordinate a process called methylation, so that detoxes the cell. So those mitochondria are really important. And they have two fuel sources. They have glucose and they have ketones. Now, if we go back, I know one of the things I love about talking to you, Jesse, is you've talked to everybody, right? And you've been doing this a long time. If we look at the trends of where we've been with food, the ketogenic diet came out, it was popular 15 years ago. And everybody started to lose weight. Everybody's my mental clarity is so insane. It's doing so well because all of a sudden, people got a little glimmer of that second fuel source. They were I work so much better when I give myself both fuel sources. But then what happened is we got everybody going low carb and too restricted, and women, that didn't work so well for women. And so now we kind of threw the ketogenic diet out. I'm saying that we need to go into these longer periods of fasting, anywhere, usually on a daily basis, you're talking 13 hours, 15 hours, 17 hours where you're not eating. So you make a ketone so that you're giving those mitochondria half of their fuel source. So, it's kind of like, I don't know if you've talked to Martha Beck. She's putting out a book right now on anxiety. And when I brought her on my podcast, she said something to me about anxiety that I had never really thought about, which was most people are only using one side of their brain. We live in a very left-brained world, and everything created in our world was created with this left brain, and we're not tapping into our right brain. And the right brain is connection and community and creativity. And we've got to bring back things like art and our imagination. And when we do that, we are now using both sides of our brain. And when you use both sides of your brain, anxiety goes away. We were not meant to use only one side of our brain. Okay, same analogy with the mitochondria. When you are using both fuel sources, you are going to get a different type of energy that most people will say feels like they're supercharged. Because without small pulses of ketones, you are actually depriving these mitochondria of half of their fuel sources. And the mitochondria wasn't meant to live off of glucose alone. Just like it wasn't meant to live off ketones alone. It was meant to have both fuel sources.
Let's stay on the mitochondria here for a bit. You mentioned the fact that people are trying to biohack these. You just gave us a good biohack there, providing them with both fuel sources.
Yep. What
other things do you do specifically to keep those healthy, the mitochondria?
Yeah, it's a really good question. The mitochondria also have a bilipid membrane around the outside of them. So that means they're very susceptible to the fats we eat. So like I've always said forever, like one of the most immediate food principles that you should make outside of the blood sugar one is choose your fat wisely, because bad fats are going to glom up that mitochondria and they'll glom up the cellular membrane, the outside. And now you can't get nutrients in there. So, you could take all the supplements in the world, but you still can't get them into the mitochondria, can't get them into the cell because these inflammatory fats block everything out. So we have the ketone needs, we have the fat needs. The third need of the mitochondria is it's actually an absence. It needs you to not inundate your system with toxins. Because on the outside of those membranes of the mitochondria live little receptor sites. And if you have toxins that flood in the cell, they will go into that membrane and they will start to change how much energy that mitochondria puts out. So like when we go back to the principle of eat nature's carbs, not man-made carbs, I'm saying that because man-made carbs are full of chemicals. So if we just remove the chemicals, then let's focus in on how do we get the right nourishment. We're not going to gum up all of those receptor sites. Now, other really fun needs of the mitochondria, and I'm sure you've done a lot of podcasts on the mitochondria, but they have light needs. So this is why everybody's red lighting it. It's like those mitochondria can be stimulated by certain frequencies or certain lengths of light. Well, it's interesting if you think about that, because where do we get red light in the day? We get it in the morning, we get it at night. So, maybe instead of buying a big red light machine, it's all you decide how you want to spend your money, but why don't we just go out in the sunrise and sunset and try to get our body exposed to some of these red light that actually is important for this mitochondrial stimulation. So, and then the last one I think is really interesting is oxygen, which is why, there's the list of the mitochondrial needs are long, but oxygen is really interesting too, because as we get older, those mitochondria become less receptive to oxygen. So I like one of the things I tell my community is can we focus in on really having workouts where you're pushing it and you're sucking oxygen in? That kind of oxygen deprivation can cause those mitochondria to pull in whatever oxygen they can get in there. So that's way outside of food, but those are the kind of things that I think of when it comes to mitochondria.
And I believe you have hyperbaric oxygen at home, a system that you can go into, correct?
I do. And I use it because it's compressed oxygen, and that compressed oxygen can get into those mitochondria and those cells and nourish those cells, so that you're not, as we get older, we become less efficient at absorbing oxygen. So when you compress oxygen, now it can get into the cells easier.
Let's come back to the bad fats. And you mentioned how these can get entangled within the mitochondrial membranes and the cell membranes. Let's talk specifically what fats we're talking about there.
So the biggies are canola oil, cottonseed oil, and corn oil. So think the 3 C's, just to try to help people remember this. Then we've got to look at some of them like partially hydrogenated oils. I don't know if you know the story behind that, but they decided about a little over 10, 15 years ago that partially hydrogenated oils were a major factor contributing to heart problems, cardiovascular problems. And when they identified that, they said, well, we're going to ask that all the food companies take it out by the year 2025. So we're coming up on that time. But meanwhile, they kept it in our food system for 10, 15 years, knowing that it's causing cardiovascular disease. So partially hydrogenated oils will soon no longer be an option to you, but they're a major one. Then we have our vegetable oils. We have our soybean oil, safflower and sunflower oil are some of the worst. And those are the ones you're going to mostly see on labels and in your restaurants.
We were talking before about the insulin, blood glucose, overwhelming the mitochondria. Let's talk about that from an insulin resistance perspective, where over time that cell becomes resistant to insulin, the body starts making more, trying to get that glucose into the cell, and how this is at the heart of metabolic issues, which are such a problem in today's health world.
So think about, dive into your cell with me for a second. What happens every time we eat a high carbohydrate meal, or every time we eat a high sugar or a bad fat meal? What ends up happening is your body registers there's this massive increase in glucose, and the pancreas has to all of a sudden create a ton of insulin. Insulin is the hormone that escorts glucose into the cell. Glucose can't get into the cell without the help of insulin. So now you have all this glucose from the food you ate. You have all of the insulin that has been produced because your body registered it. And all of that is rushing to the cell. And insulin's trying to shove glucose into the cell. But there's only a little tiny spot and little receptor sites for it to get it in there. And then on top of that, now you're eating a lot of bad oils. And the bad oils have that outer part of the cell really inflamed. And maybe you're eating a lot of toxins, because toxins are allowed, chemicals are allowed in our food system right now. And those chemicals are blocking these receptor sites. So the outer part of the cell is like, 6 o'clock rush hour in Manhattan. Like it's just jammed up with too much glucose, too much insulin, too many bad fats, too many chemicals, and nothing is getting into the cell. So your body is so intelligent that what it decides is, I can't get all this stuff into the cell. So what I'm going to do is I need to go store it somewhere. So in order to save your life, it doesn't immediately think to store it around your internal organs. It'll decide to store it in fat. And the fat it's going to store it in is going to be around your belly, back of your arms, your booty, your face. It'll even store it in the fat in your brain. It just starts to sock it away in fat because it knows if it puts it in fat, it won't kill you. Whereas if it put it around your heart and lungs, then it would kill you. So this insulin resistance is multifactorial. But this is like This is the crux of the human health problem right now. And I know there's so many people talking about this. Like, we have got to bring back insulin sensitivity. And it starts by understanding how this traffic jam is happening and what the consequence of that is. And that, again, this is why I think fasting works so well, is because it gave people a break and the cell was like, okay, nothing's coming in for a moment. I can start to bring down some inflammation. I can let some things in. It stopped the traffic jam, the cellular traffic jam from happening.
I want to highlight something that underlied what you brought up there. The fact that the body is doing this in a way to help you, where it has insulin resistance starting, nowhere to put this glucose, and it's trying to protect you by storing it in different areas of the body. And like you mentioned, it's going to put them in the least harmful areas first. So a lot of times people probably demonize their body for, putting on weight, becoming fat, looking in the mirror and feeling bad about themselves. But this is your body, a warning sign from your body, and your body trying to help you.
That's right. I'm so happy you brought this up, because I have been trying to scream this from the rooftops. What happens when we look in the mirror? And this happens, to both men and women, but a lot to women. We look in the mirror, we see the fat we don't like. And then we start to talk poorly to ourselves. Like, I wasn't able to follow a diet. I'm never going to be thin. It must be in my genetics. Like, you start the hatred, the guilt, the shame that happens just by what we see in the mirror looking back at us. But in reality, your brilliant body decided that it had too much of something. It had too much glucose, it had too many hormones, and it had too many toxins. And it had to make a decision in that moment if it was going to put that in an area that would kill you, like your heart and lungs, or put it around your belly that might not be aesthetically pleasing, but would save your life. And it chose to put it in an area that would save your life. And yet we villainize it. We shame ourselves around it. And your body was doing absolutely the right thing in order for you to survive. So I personally think we should look at our fat and be like, thank you, body. Thank you for storing it somewhere else. Now let's work together to release that storage, which is really, where Fast Like a Girl and even Eat Like a Girl will do, is just help women understand how you can release all that storage. But the first thing you got to do is forgive yourself. You got to understand the body was doing the most perfect thing given the condition that the environment in which it was exposed to.
It was just responding to the inputs you gave it. And likely you were trying your best with the information you had.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it wasn't the right information. And that's why we're going to do our best today to cover what people need to do, give it the right inputs so people can start to shed that weight. And it's beyond a cosmetic issue. This has to do with your metabolic health and preventing chronic disease. So there's always that piece of this argument that tends to focus on, I'm comfortable in my body. I don't mind having the extra weight. Well, that's one aspect to it. And that part is very gray and hard to argue. But there are health complications when you're metabolically unhealthy and when you have that extra weight that we can't deny.
That's right. That's an interesting one. I'm so happy you bring it up, because I first off want to say the goal of metabolic health is not for us all to look the same. The analogy or the story I always say is, I remember going to the Olympic Museum in Lake Geneva, Switzerland. And there's this picture on the wall of all the different gold medal athletes in all the different sports. And they had one for men and they had one for women. I, of course, looked at the woman one. And when I looked at that, I was like, here are 25, 30 gold medal athletes, and their body types could not be any more different. So I'm not advocating for us all to be super thin. I'm advocating for us to A, love living in our body. And then B, you just said it, what does your blood work look like? And I personally like make sure that, if you're carrying 5, 10, 20 extra pounds, what does your blood work look like? Is it showing that you are healthy? And I have found that most of the time it's not. I've found a rare few people that are, overweight, carrying extra weight, and have amazing blood work. It's not always, those two don't go together always. Now, if you want to dial it down even more, the most important piece of the blood work that you need to look at is your hemoglobin A1C. That tells you what your glucose and insulin system has been doing for 90 days. That needs to be around 5. I can tell you in my community, we have a lot of people when they first come into like my Reset Academy, where we're teaching them different fasts and different ways of eating. People will just say like, I'm 5.5, I'm 5.6. In this healthcare system, that's considered like not perfect, obviously, but it's okay. You might be a little pre-diabetic. But if we all just followed that one number, like stop following the number on the scale, stop following the BMI, like that doesn't matter. Follow hemoglobin A1C and get that number around 5. And then look at yourself in the mirror and ask yourself, do I love living in this body? If you love living in this body, that hemoglobin A1C is close to 5. Now we're in a body that is functioning the way it's supposed to function. But that's not what's happening. What most people will do is they'll carry extra weight and then they'll be like, it's okay, I'm fine. I like being this weight. Well, let's make sure A, that statement's completely accurate. And that's fine. If it's completely accurate, great. And then B, let's make sure your blood work, especially hemoglobin A1C, is in the right spot.
Isn't it true hemoglobin A1C is looking at glycation of red blood cells?
Yeah. Yes.
So to me, wouldn't it be one step better to look at fasting insulin? Because insulin, the way I understand it, can be deceptive, have deception covering that number, because if it's jamming the glucose into cells and insulin's rising over time, your hemoglobin A1C can still remain more normal while your insulin is climbing and you're becoming insulin resistant. Is there truth to that, the way you see it?
I like a longer picture. So the reason I like hemoglobin A1C is it tells me what that metabolic system's been doing for 90 days. When I've sent patients to blood work and we look at their fasting insulin, you're just getting a snapshot of that day. You're not necessarily getting this long-term picture. So I like hemoglobin A1C for the long vision. Second thing, I want to bring up the glycation thing because this is massively important and it ties into the mitochondrial needs. So glycation is an indicator of how many glucose molecules are gummed up on a red blood cell. That red blood cell is carrying oxygen to your tissues. If hemoglobin A1C is really high, it means that you're not getting glucose into your cells for use, and it's sticking on the outside of these red blood cells, which is impacting oxygen and how much oxygen can be delivered to the tissues, which ultimately tissues that don't have oxygen in them, the mitochondria is not going to be stimulated, and that tissue will die. So I like hemoglobin A1C because it has this long-term vision, plus it tells us functionality. Why is there extra glucose around your red blood cells? Why is it there? Well, the reason it's there is because it can't get into the cell. Insulin's having trouble getting it into the cells. And so what ends up happening is it's flooding in the system and being stored elsewhere.
Okay. Maybe the ideal is to have both because, again, coming back to the way I see it is early on when insulin is rising, like the earliest stages of insulin resistance, you're going to be jamming that glucose out of the bloodstream. So your hemoglobin A1C won't be going up because insulin's artificially bringing that glucose down. And you can see the picture earlier on by looking at fasting insulin. Once it can't jam that glucose into the cell, blood glucose raises, then hemoglobin A1C is going to rise. So again, I think there's different value in both those numbers, but just wanted to round out that explanation.
Yeah, so you're right. I'm not saying don't look at the other numbers. I'm just trying to make things really simple for people. So let's use your scenario as an example. You walk into your doctor's office and they do a blood work on you and they find your insulin is really high. The next question is, how long has it been high? How much damage has it done? Well, if insulin's high, then we know glucose is high. So now let's go to hemoglobin A1C. Oh, over the last 90 days, it's been pretty high. This isn't a today problem. This is a problem from the last several months. So again, you can use both of them, but I think the hemoglobin A1C lets you know how long this has been going on and what is the consequence that's going to happen. So they're both very much helpful. I just have found hemoglobin A1C to be the most motivating when we're trying to make change.
Have you heard of the Kraft test?
No, I haven't.
That's where you take in a bolus of glucose, I believe, and I'm just paraphrasing the way I understand it. And then you look at insulin over a period of time. So you're doing it, it's better even than a fasting insulin, where you're in the doctor's office having that bolus of glucose and then looking at insulin over a number of hours and how the body responds to it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, again, love the idea. Let's make it easy. I'm all about, we've got a metabolic mess in the world. It's incredibly horrible in the United States. How are we going to motivate people? How are we going to make this simple for people so people can get out of the metabolic mess that they're in? And so, yeah, if you want to look at insulin, great. If you want to look at hemoglobin A1C, now we've nuanced that. If you want to do the Kraft test, all of that could be interesting. But how are we going to make this easy for the single mom who's working 2 jobs and can barely figure out time to put some food in her mouth? That's the person I want to try to reach, is how do we help her?
For that person, somebody who doesn't have the time or resources right now to even go to the doctor and have anything assessed, what do you feel is the best assessment to do at home to see where you're at on that spectrum of insulin resistance all the way to type 2 diabetes?
Oh, it's a great question. I think the first question is, can you go without food? The first sign of mitochondrial dysfunction is when you can't go more than a couple hours without food. So really important to understand your hunger habits. In fact, all the weight loss drugs, it's that is a sign of the metabolic mess we're in that didn't just randomly happen. We have all these toxic foods that came into our system that threw off our metabolic health, and now we've come up with drugs to kill the hunger. But without to start with, can you go without food? If you can't go without food, we've got some mitochondrial distress here. So that's really the first one. The second one that I think, if for people who don't have money or don't have time, is to think about, am I energized after food? If I'm not energized after food, if I'm sleepy, there's a good chance that glucose couldn't get into the cell. And so all of a sudden now it's swimming in your body and it's going maybe up into your brain. It's causing a little bit of brain fog. You should, when you eat, your cells should grab that glucose, pass it into the outer membrane of the cell, give it to the mitochondria, and the mitochondria should be like, yes. And then all of a sudden it gives you ATP. But that if you're eating and then you're sleepy, or if you're eating and then a couple of hours later you're like, I'm hangry, I need to eat again, then we've got a metabolic challenge. And then the other one that I even if we want to get even more nuanced, is women going through perimenopause and menopause. The brain becomes less and less sensitive to glucose through that menopause experience. So if you've got brain fog, consistent brain fog, my question is what's your hemoglobin A1C? What's going on with your fasting glucose? Get a handheld monitor or a CGM and understand what's going on, because your body is becoming inefficient at using glucose, so the brain fog continues to be worse. So we can use symptoms, we can use blood tests, we can use some of these the things, the biometric wearables and things that are available to us. But ultimately, ask yourself if you can go without food. If you can't go without food, we have the beginning of a metabolic challenge that you're going to want to take care of.
Did you say perimenopause, that the brain can't utilize glucose as well?
Yeah, it starts in
beyond?
Yeah,
right.
It starts in perimenopause, yeah.
Does that mean going into ketosis at that time more frequently could be advantageous to provide that alternative source of fuel?
Yep, bingo. So Lisa Mosconi and I actually talked deeply about this because her comment, what she would say is that exactly the way I said it, that the brain through the perimenopausal process and into menopause, but specifically in perimenopause, is starting to become less and less efficient at taking glucose in. When I asked her exactly what you just asked me, I was like, so does that mean that the ketone becomes the preferred fuel source for the perimenopause and menopausal brain? She said, well, we don't have any research on that. We only know it's less efficient at taking in glucose. And I said, well, I can tell you in my community that I see all the time women that are like, they start to get some ketones and all of a sudden they get focus again. Their brain comes back online. And she said to me, yeah, I hear that all the time too. And I was like, well, you're the female brain researcher. Can you research ketones for us, please? And she's like, yeah, I'll add it to my list. And I just tell you all that to say we don't have the studies yet to know, is the ketone this miraculous molecule for the perimenopause and menopausal brain? I don't have research on that, but I have hundreds of thousands of women that will tell you absolutely when they learned to fast and they got a ketone, they got focus back. And that is telling to me.
This reminds me of the work of Chris Palmer and Dr. Georgia Ede, focusing on ketones for people that are suffering with mental health issues, providing that additional source of energy to the brain, and some of the profound impacts that they've seen in patients who are suffering with a wide range of mental health conditions.
Yeah. Yeah, they've even, there's been a lot of discussion in my community about exogenous ketones, which are ketones you take from the outside. And I've gone back and forth on my thought on that. But if you had a loved one that had Alzheimer's, like, it would be interesting to see what ketones going in, if that would give some kind of increased memory. And we've had people in our community report back that absolutely it did. I'm not saying that it's a cure-all. I'm just saying this is the conversation we have in there. In my clinic for years, kids that were having either that were autistic or having learning challenges, even some of the different forms of personality, like Asperger's and things like that, we would play with exogenous ketones. We would work together with the parent to see, what if we give, because you're not going to put a kid or a senior who's got Alzheimer's on a ketogenic diet or fast them for long periods. It's usually pretty difficult. So we would play with putting these exogenous ketones in and then watching to see what would happen. And the results were really profound, because here's the other thing that ketones bring with them. Ketones bring GABA. So when ketones are up, you stimulate that neurotransmitter that calms. So that's why you get that focused, focused brain function, plus your brain is calm. So yeah, I mean, and then they used it for seizures. I know that they've used it in a lot of high performance states. Like, I've heard stories of Navy SEALs that have used, the power of ketones to enhance performance. The ketone's a pretty mighty little molecule.
A lot of connections there to the brain.
Yeah.
And then, of course, an area that would have to be teased apart is exogenous versus producing them internally. You mentioned the GABA aspect. It's like, how many different benefits would you get from taking them exogenously comparative to making them on your own through the diet? So lots of areas to study there, but all very interesting, and people can experiment and very cool stuff.
My general premise is always get it from within. So if you can get them within, don't spend your money on these exogenous resources. My second principle with the exogenous ketones is if you look at the state of the human body, ketones were meant to come in when blood sugar was coming down. So if I eat a meal and then I drink some exogenous ketones, that's an unnatural state for the body. So I still feel like there are principles to follow, but for the sake of this conversation, what people should know, but especially women over 40, is this ketone. If you've never tried to get a ketone from within, it could be that lifeline you're looking for with your brain health. And that's probably the most helpful thing that I can say at this moment is like, use it through this perimenopausal journey in which the brain is adapting to all of the changes in hormones, and it's less sensitive to glucose, and the brain fog and the focus and the depression, all that is showing up. Like, try going into these fasted states, get yourself some ketones, and then report back. Let me know. How did you feel? And most women say, wow, like my brain finally came back online.
You talked about how you flip-flopped over the years with the exogenous ketones. Somebody in your position, you're in your mid-50s, postmenopausal, is that something that's part of your routine right now for the brain aspect?
Oh, yeah.
Talk about how you incorporate them.
Yeah, so much so I like to skip breakfast. I'm usually done eating at like 6 o'clock at night, 7 o'clock at night, and then I won't eat till 1 or 2 the next day. So I front load my morning. So most of my work is done from 7 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon. So I'll break my meal like around 2 or 3, but I know if I can run off these ketones and do most of my work in the morning, that my brain is at its sharpest. If I'm ever giving a big speech, like a keynote speech, always do it in a fasted state. Fast like a girl, written in a fasted state. Like anything that I need brain power for, I rely on that ketone, and I do it in a fasted state.
Are you in a fasted state right now?
I'm not. I actually just ate before. I didn't even follow my own rule, but I don't know if you know, right now I'm in Italy. So it's nighttime here. So I had to have a little bit of dinner before I popped on this call.
Fair enough. And you took that previous question from the perspective of diet-wise, fasting, and making your own. I was coming at it from exogenous ketones. Is that something that gets put into the mix too for you?
Oh, do I use exogenous ketones?
Yeah. You got into the dietary and fasting aspect and how you're making your own, but I was coming at it from exogenous ketones, putting those into the mix.
So where I use exogenous ketones is in the fasted state. So I don't do it when I eat. And I'll do it to give me a little push and brain fuel to extend the fast. So I've used it in 3-day water fasts. I'll use it if it's, like, I guess I could have used it today. It's like, I was popping on this call with you at 7 o'clock at night, my time. And I could have fasted all day and then had some exogenous ketones just to give me that extra little push for this interview. But again, I chose to eat. So yes, but your logic is accurate. Like, you can use that exogenous ketone to help you fast a little longer. And we do this in our community all the time. One of my favorite things to do is we do a 3-day water fast every January and every September. And these water fasts have gotten so big, we get about 100,000 people. The last one had 100,000 people worldwide fasting together. It was so fun. And I introduced the concept of exogenous ketones. Like, if you get on day 2 and you're suffering, you may look at exogenous ketones to help you push through that, because you might get that calming effect to the brain that you may not naturally be getting. So yes, there is definitely, you can use it as a tool. Having said that, I want to continue to be the champion of health information that doesn't require you buy a supplement, that doesn't require you are constantly looking outside yourself. My passion is helping women understand how their bodies work so you can get all the neurochemistry, you can work with all the internal processes that your body naturally came with. So that's the lens in which I look.
For completeness in this area, let's talk about MCT oil. So kind of an in-between of ketones and then relying specifically on diet and fasting. And then there's nuance within that, different C8, C10, different types of MCT. So let's bring that in.
So here's where I go with MCT oil. It's phenomenal, again, in the fasted state. I love it in coffee. I think it's great in coffee because what it does is it'll turn off the hunger hormone. So we know something really interesting, and this is new stuff that I've been really diving into in the last couple of weeks. I recently saw a study that said that one of the challenges with the GLP-1 hormone, this is the one, again, we're back at why everybody's diving in to these weight loss drugs, is that the bad fats, when you're eating a bad fat diet, you actually are damaging the microbes in your gut that make GLP-1. Okay? So then my brain was like, well, what if you put the good fats in there? Will you create more of this hormone that shuts hunger off? Well, we know olive oil is high in polyphenols and feeds the microbiome. I couldn't find any studies that show that olive oil increases GLP-1 hormone. But I'm going to put MCT oil, what my general statement about MCT oil is it kills hunger and it allows you to fast a little bit longer. But I'm now taking that thought and thinking a little deeper and asking myself, is it because it's helping nourish those microbes that actually make this hormone that everybody's trying to inject themselves with? What if it's as simple as staying off the bad fats, like this article said, and then feeding the microbes the good fats? And if you feed the microbes the good fats, you make your own natural GLP-1 and you don't need to get on the weight loss drugs. That is where my brain is going, and that is where I put MCT oil in there. That it is having a microbial effect that is upregulating this hormone that everybody's trying to get.
Okay, thought experiment. Somebody on a weight loss journey, and they're going to include coffee in their fasting window. Would they be better off putting MCT oil in, adding, food and calories, or just having the coffee black? And what I'm getting at there is trying to tease out the piece of burning fat that you're taking in versus burning body fat, and what the person would be better off doing if they're thinking about using the MCT oil to help with hunger.
So you know what I reference in that, and I put this in Eat Like a Girl. We have a whole chapter. I have a whole chapter on this, which is something called the fasted snack. So there was a research that was done that they took a group of people, and one group, they said, just stop fasting at 13 hours. Just go 13 hours, stop fasting. The next group, they said, at 13 hours, you're going to have a fat bomb. And that fat bomb, then we're going to ask that you go 2 more hours. You go 15 total hours. But at 13 hours, you have the fat bomb. And so what they found is the people that went 2 more hours using the fat bomb lost more weight specifically around their belly. And they saw greater improvements in their metabolic markers, like the markers we've been talking about. So, and this was done over a period of several months. So this is a really interesting twist on fasting that I think we need to have a really good nuanced discussion about this. When you are fasting, is it always just drink water? Or are there certain things you could do in the fasting window that would help your metabolic system? And when I ask that question, I go in and I'm like, yes, there are things, and it's called fat. Fat is definitely one of them. and I would plop MCT oil in there. So if we go back to the question you asked me, which was, if somebody's on a weight loss journey, should they include MCT oil, or should they be worried about the calories, or they're worried about too much fat? Based off that science on the fasted snack, I say you use your MCT oil and see if you can fast a little longer and get a little bit more of a benefit in that fasted window, because ultimately what the science says is that it's going to help you lose more weight by fasting those extra hours.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's going to allow you to fast longer and be in a better position that way. I guess where we would still need probably more science is if somebody's using that and still fasting within the same window, and they were just using that to get a cognitive benefit during their fasting window, or they were still breaking their fast at the same time out of habit or whatnot, and including that fat in the fasted window, getting the calories. And then we know it's not very much of an insulin spike, but even fat does cause a reaction from insulin, even though it's very minimal.
Right. Where your logic is absolutely right. Again, like I'm always thinking about what is the body needing at what point in time. And when we're in that fasted state, if hunger kicks in and you're like, but I want to keep going, putting some MCT oil, or even I've had people do a scoop of olive oil just on a spoon and eat it. Do something fat rich like that and then go a little longer. That is a win. You are working with the body in this fasted state. Whereas if I'm in the eating state and I'm putting all kinds of fat on my food, now I'm a big fan of good fat on your food, and I consider MCT oil a good fat. But if you're worried about the calories, then just take your oil and move it to your fasting window and elongate your fasting window. And now you're literally getting the best of both worlds.
Okay, so we have MCT oil, olive oil. What other foods are in that category of snacks during fasting?
Oh yeah, so this is really fun. We actually have fasted snack recipes in the new book, because I was like, I want to help people see that a fasting lifestyle is easy, and I found this study, and we've been practicing the principles. So it's like you want to keep your calories under 400 calories. So the minute you go over 400 calories, now you've popped yourself out of that fasted state. You also need to keep your protein under 20 grams. The minute you go over 20 grams, you've moved out of autophagy and you're now in that growth state of mTOR. So those were the two biggest pieces of the fasted snack. So you'll see in the book, we've got some Chef Leslie, one of my plant-based chef, who I had two chefs contribute to this book, and one was plant-based and one was omnivore. So the plant-based chef made like these incredible crackers, because a lot of people, when they are like, tell me that when they fast, they want the crunch. There's something about the crunch. So we figured out this like prebiotic seed cracker and you could use like a little olive tamponade with it. And we give the dosage and how much you eat in there, and that will help you not pull yourself out of this fasted state. We also did some drinks in there that you can drink. And I have a little bit of a fasted salad that stays within those fasted snack requirements. So, the idea is metabolic flexibility and accessing both of these metabolisms. And we're really nuanced in this conversation right now. Like when you get into the research, you look at the fine details, there are certain things you can eat in the fasting window if you follow the principles of the study.
Coming back to these periodic 3-day water fasts you do with your community, given all we're saying about fasting snacks, coffee, MCT oil, do you feel there are certain benefits, though, that you get from fasting on water only, that having those periodic periods, obviously there's two variables. One is if we're just on water, but then we're also going 3 days, which is significantly longer than a typical day of intermittent fasting. But being on water only is the part I want to hone in on. Any specific benefits doing that periodically that you're only going to get from that type of fast?
Well, so the thing to know on that is with water only, what you're doing is you're telling the body for 3 days, hey, I'm not going to put any information into this system. I'm not going to raise my glucose. I even recommend for 3-day water fast, don't take your supplements. Like all I'm going to do is give you water because you can't go very long without water. So I'm going to give you water. I'm going to let you figure out what needs to be repaired. So to me, yes, I want people to build what we call a fasting lifestyle, where they learn how to go from sugar burner to fat burner. They experiment with the 6 different length fasts I created in Fast Like a Girl. But then at least once or twice a year, I encourage people to go into a 3-day water fast, which is a total immersion into the body healing itself. You're literally sending a signal to your body and saying, I don't know what you need right now, but I know you know what we need right now. So I'm going to stop the input from coming in so that you can heal yourself. The minute we add some bone broth in, the minute we add even minerals, I'm a big fan of people taking minerals during longer fasts. But the minute we add the fasted snack in these longer fasts, you're adding information in and the healing may be affected. And this is just in the context of the 3-day water fast. In all the other fasts, great. Like you can play with that fasting window in some of these principles. But the 3-day water fast to me is like this gold standard of fasting. And it is really where you are honoring the body's ability to heal itself. So don't put anything into the system.
That's what I was getting at. Exactly. And what type of water would you use or recommend for other people? And it sounds like minerals go into the water. Let's get into the details for somebody that wants to take this on and try it.
Yeah. So if you're going to go on to a deeper, into some of the, to me, any fast over 24 hours is a little bit longer. One thing that we have noticed in our community is that a lot of people in the longer fasts will exhibit signs of mineral depletion. Our soils are incredibly mineral depleted right now. So what I started to see is most people aren't getting enough minerals in. And so when they go into some of the longer fasts, what happens is, like, especially women will start to lose their hair. Some people, especially women, will all of a sudden get stuck with their weight loss. Some people start to get rashes or a lot of brain fog. And so just adding in some simple magnesium, potassium, and sodium can keep your mineral level up and make it a much more comfortable fast. So I like that part of it, and everybody has to figure out where their comfort level is. Outside of that, regular water is great. I sometimes will do sparkling water because it's something that my brain likes. So it's just a way of like entertaining my brain. Personally, I love Grolsteiner sparkling water because it has the most amount of minerals in it. And I personally love the bubble size. Like I've become a little bit of a mineral water aficionado. So that's why I like that water. But you choose your water. The last water, and I'm sure you've done some podcasts on this that is really interesting, is hydrogen water. We've played with fasts where all they drank was hydrogen water, and those ended up being some of the easiest 3-day water fasts. So again, we're in the nuance of fasting. Why did that work? Well, hydrogen feeds the microbes in your gut. And sometimes hunger kicks in because the microbes aren't getting what they need. So feeding them hydrogen causes those microbes to stop squawking at you saying, eat, please eat, please eat. So when we look at water in the 3-day water fast, you can trick it out with those 3 concepts. But literally, if you're like listening to this, you're like, I'm so confused. Like that was a masterclass. That was like the fine detail that we talk about in my community a lot when we go into these longer fasts. If that's all too much of a hurdle, just go into a longer fast and you'll experience what you need along the way.
And do you find with people, the average person, doing a 3-day water fast on their own, they're okay to do that? Or at what point should somebody get a doctor involved?
Great question. So first, my biggest surprise in doing so many 3-day water fasts with so many people is how many people can actually do it, even though they haven't even fasted before. And like, it'll change their life. That shocked me, because I'm always like, you should probably train for it. Make sure you practice the 24-hour fast. All of that is typically what I say when it comes to the 3-day water fast. But I've seen people, no fasting experience at all, do a 3-day water fast, drop a bunch of weight, and the weight stays off and it changes their life. Okay, now having said that, there are certain people that need to get their doctor involved. Diabetic and pre-diabetic, absolutely. If you already know your metabolic health is really off, then please get your doctor involved in a 3-day water fast. So diabetic and pre-diabetic is really important. If you have cancer, get your doctor involved. Unfortunately, most doctors don't know enough about fasting, but one of the things I did on my YouTube channel for years was try to put the science in there so doctors could feel comfortable with what I was saying. They could read it for themselves. And then many of those doctors started sending people to my channel because they could look at the science and see that it was there. So, send your doctor a video that has the science attached to it and engage in a healthy conversation there. The other place that's really interesting that comes up a lot with fasting, and I encourage you to get whoever the health expert is helping you with this, is eating disorders. If you have a history of eating disorders, please don't just jump into a fasting lifestyle without having whoever is helping you with the eating disorder help you, guide you through that process. But those are kind of it. I mean, everybody else, I've just seen some really spectacular things with people just diving in and letting their body do the rest.
How do you feel about somebody who right now doesn't have a lot of extra weight to lose or any, jumping into a 3-day water fast or even 24 hours? Somebody that just feels like they don't want to lose any weight at this point. And then as a subcategory on that, muscle mass with, say, fasting 24 hours at a time and then beyond.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm so happy you asked me about the muscle mass one, because people start to get critical of fasting because of the muscle mass. So if you don't want to lose weight and you want the healing benefits of fasting, make sure you're eating enough before you go into the fast. Then do your fast and make sure you're eating enough when you come out. A 3-day water fast for somebody who doesn't want to lose weight. They may feel like they lost weight, but the minute they go back into food, especially if you go back into protein and you protein load, what's going to end up happening is you'll gain the weight back. We have to remember the body is always trying to come to homeostasis. So the person that has to lose, the body needs to release weight, will release weight and come back to a balanced point. And somebody whose body doesn't need to release weight will go on a longer fast, might lose weight, but the minute they eat food, they come back to this balanced point. So what were those, do you remember as a kid, those clowns that we would like punch and they would knock over and then they would come back up again?
Yes.
They were like,
I haven't thought about those in years.
Yeah, what did we call those? They were like Bozo the Clown. They had
like something like that. They had a weight in the bottom and they would just back and forth.
That's right.
It's funny you don't see them anymore, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to them. But so if you have to lose weight, it's like you go into the fasted state and then the body will try to recalibrate itself back to that middle point. Same thing if you need to gain weight. So we're always coming back to homeostasis. So that's the first thing. Okay. Second thing, let's talk about the muscle loss. There's 2 critiques I see over and over and over again about fasting that I would love to clear up. And a good reason why I wrote Eat Like a Girl. The first one is when you fast, you're going to lose muscle. Now you have to understand that when you are fasting, your body is getting rid of what no longer serves it. So it is breaking down muscle. It is getting rid of stored sugar in muscle so it can make itself new again. And so if you don't want to lose muscle, you go into the fasted state, but once you come back into the fed state, make sure you're powering up on protein. You got a mega load on protein. so that you can stimulate that mTOR pathway and you can get the growth of muscle again. But fasting, if you're trying to gain muscle and all you're doing is fasting and not eating more protein in the fed state, yes, you will continue to see your muscles shrink. But when we go into the gym and we lift a weight, what the purpose of that process is to break down a muscle so it will build itself stronger again. When we go into a fasted state, the purpose in these fasted states can be breaking muscle down, getting rid of what no longer serves it. So refuel it when you go back into the fed state. So that is protein. Okay, the other piece of this is the microbiome. I just have to throw it in because this is the same thing that I hear. Fasting destroys the microbiome. Okay, in the fasted state, what's happening is your intelligent body is getting rid of the microbes that no longer serve you. It's getting rid of the bad guys. It's changing the whole terrain in there. It's fixing a leaky gut. It's upregulating the intestinal stem cells. Like there is massive repair going on in all different length fasts in the microbiome. When you go back into the fed state, if you want a really healthy microbiome, you want to continue that healing effect, then you're going to need to do fermented foods. Bring those fermented foods back in so we can bring good probiotic rich foods. Add in those polyphenol foods, a lot of olives, berries, blueberries are high in polyphenols. Chocolate is high in polyphenols. Add some of the polyphenols in, and then the prebiotic foods like the nuts, the seeds, the chia seeds, the hemp seeds. Like add that all in, and now you're feeding the good microbes and you're allowing them to grow. So one of the challenges I see with the critics of fasting is they're taking fasting and only looking at the fasting window. This is why Eat Like a Girl was so important to write for me, because I was like, I got to show you the principles of eating and how these two work together. But fasting became this like hero, like biohack, and we keep it in isolation without pairing it to the right foods. I would like to talk about how do you make sure that first meal matters? How do you build muscle, build a good microbiome, and specifically in that first meal?
All right. So the two concerns you addressed, the microbiome and loss of muscle mass. What you're saying is the food we have afterwards is going to nullify those. To get into a little bit more detail on that, if somebody's doing a longer fast, is it the first meal that they come back from that they're going to want to introduce protein and fermented foods? Or do we want to ease back in with something more gentle and then within, say, 24 hours, get those other foods in to rebuild?
The latter. So if you're doing a fast longer than 24 hours, in both books, I have a 4-step process. And so you want to start with a broth, then you bring in the fermented food, then you test some like vegetables, lightly steamed vegetables, and then you bring in the protein. So the longer the fast, the more methodical that process needs to be. If it's a 15, 17 hour, maybe even a 24-hour fast, then just ask yourself, I want to build muscle, so I better make sure I get enough protein in this first meal. So yes, there are two different styles to be able to ease back into food with intention and have an effect on your body.
Okay, so fermented food's good. How are you feeling about probiotics these days in general, and then after a longer fast to replenish the gut?
The supplement?
Yeah, a supplement.
Yeah, I think temporary use of a probiotic is good. What I clinically saw for so many years is people using a probiotic and taking it over and over and over again. I would always tell my patients, you have 90 days on a probiotic and then you need to get off of it. And the reason for that is we've got trillions of bacteria in our gut. We've got thousands of different species. Even the best probiotic that you could ever find maybe has 100 at the best strains of different probiotics, but you have thousands of these different strains. So when we take a probiotic over and over and over again, we create what we call a monoculture, where there are certain bacteria that really become dominant and other bacteria that become less useful. The name of the microbial game is diversity. You want all those good microbes to be fed and energized. You don't want to create this imbalance. So I like probiotics as temporary tools that can help you grow certain parts of your microbiome. To your point, I think they could be interesting after a fast. They could be interesting during a fast, because what you're doing is you're helping to replenish the microbes that some of those microbes might have sloughed off. You're adding, it's just like fermented foods. You're adding in the good probiotics so we can really start to repopulate this. It's a little bit like putting Miracle-Gro, after you've cleaned up all the soils in your garden and you're about to like put in some new plants. It's like adding a probiotic would be like Miracle-Gro that it's just going to do an extra special thing for the food that's to come.
And this relates to how we opened up talking about all the confusion within different diets and ways of eating. These days, the probiotic world, specifically within the health and wellness space, has become so complicated with soil-based, spore-based, double encapsulated. We could go on and on, refrigerated, non-refrigerated. What do you look for in a good probiotic?
Well, the first thing is whatever probiotic you're taking, make sure you don't take it more than 90 days. Keep switching it up. If you have like 5 probiotics, keep switching them up. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is I'm all about microbial diversity. So I want something that's got like like as many different strains in it as possible. So something that has 10 strains, 12 strains, that's not very strong. But if you can find something that has 50 to 100 different strains of bacteria, okay, now you've got a pretty diverse probiotic. And then as far as the soil-based, the double encapsulated, I shy away from that stuff because, again, I actually shy away from probiotics in general because what I see is the fasted state mixed with the way you break your fast, the way I've explained it, is far more beneficial to the gut than an actual probiotic. Now, there are certain things like, I don't know if you've had this woman on your podcast, but I was just at a dinner party a couple of weeks ago with a bunch of wellness people in the wellness world. And one of the women there is a scientist who studies a specific strain of probiotic called Akkermansia. You probably have had her on. Everybody is all into this strain of bacteria. And so I presented this to her. I'm like, this is what I see in the fasting world. What do you think? And she said, I love everything you're saying. I absolutely agree, with the exception that Akkermansia you can't get in food. Okay. And I'm like, well, and then what happens? Does that bacteria die as you age? And she's like, yes. So now I haven't gone to see what the fasting research shows on particularly helping this one strain of bacteria. But if we have certain microbes that we can't get in food and we lose those microbes over time and we can only get those microbes in probiotics, now I'm interested. But for the most part, I think fasting and breaking it with what these polyphenol probiotic and prebiotic foods, it outperforms any probiotic that's out there.
Okay, so we've made it clear we don't need to fear fasting when it comes to the microbiome. What are some of the things in the modern environment, inputs, that are having the biggest detriment on the microbiome these days?
Well, we're back in the ultra-processed foods. I mean, you know what I love is ultra-processed foods are having a day. Like we're hearing it, and I hope people are grabbing it. So the toxic oils, the highly refined carbohydrates, the highly refined sugars, and the chemicals in food destroy your microbiome. Antibiotic-rich foods. So these are your meats that antibiotics have been either pumped into the animal or they have been eating grains that have been sprayed with a lot of chemicals. So we have to look at the quality of meat if you're going to eat meat. And I think grass-fed is amazing. Grass-fed beef is incredible. Some of the wild salmon is really good. It's got all those omegas in the wild salmon that are going to feed the microbes. So we want to make sure we got clean meat, not toxic meat. The taking of antibiotics, the taking of the birth control pill. In preparing for Eat Like a Girl, I ended up down a whole rabbit hole of what the birth control pill is doing to the microbes in our gut. And it's changing those microbes so that they become less efficient at upregulating about 9 different vitamins and minerals. So now it's those microbes that pull the vitamins and minerals out of your food, and the birth control pill has killed those microbes. So now you're getting deficient in those vitamins and minerals. It also destroys, overall the microbial system. So, and how many women have been on birth control pill for decades? So I have to throw the birth control pill into that one as well. And then
any stats if people are using less of it? In our world, it's been known for a long time of the detriments of using that. But have you looked at any stats in a general sense if it's still being widely used?
I haven't seen lower dose is what you're asking. Like if we go into a lower dose birth control
Just if
pill?
less people are using it, the awareness of the detriment of it is becoming more mainstream and less people are using it.
I hope so.
If you've seen that at all.
I mean, I haven't seen it at all. I can tell you that I have a 24-year-old daughter and a 22-year-old son, and I hang around a lot of 20-year-olds because of it. And I have a lot of conversations because of my passion for hormones with these 20-year-olds, and birth control is one that comes up a lot. And I would say based off that small sample size, I am not seeing that people are shying away from the birth control pill.
Okay.
I don't.
That's what I was getting at.
Yeah, I would need to see more stats, but from hanging out with that generation, no. Most of them are going on birth control early. And then there is the second most common one is an IUD. A lot of them are switching to IUDs, which would be better for the microbes. So that might be, maybe we're seeing more people switch over to that, but I don't have the stats. I only have the conversations I've had with several people in that generation.
When I jumped in there, you're going to go into another input negatively impacting the microbiome.
Oh, the last one is stress. Like you want to destroy your microbiome, like the more stress you have, the more you kill those microbes. So, but in Eat Like a Girl, I listed out like ingredients. So I really wanted charts in there for people to be able to go, oh, these are the things I need to look for in ingredient labels. A lot of the chemicals that are in ultra processed foods are listed in that chart.
Let's go all the way back to the beginning of our chat. You were going through the 5 general principles of the diet, and then we got on a lot of different tangents. We may have covered the other 3, but we were on number 3 at that time. Anything else within those last 3 we haven't talked about?
Yeah, just for simplicity so people know. 1 was blood sugar matters, calories don't. 2 was nature's carbs, not human-made carbs. 3 fits perfectly what we're talking about right now. Feed your microbes, not your taste buds. The reason this is important is because your microbes control your taste buds. So if you do everything I'm talking about here, where you are fasting and then breaking your fast with your microbes in mind, your cravings change. The biggest one of that was an incredible study done really long time ago, over 10 years ago, called the Every Other Day diet. And that was where they took people who they said, eat whatever you want. You eat it one day, you fast the next. Eat the next day, you eat whatever you want, and then you fast. So every other day you're fasting. They did that for a year, and at the end of the year, what they found is that all their metabolic markers had improved. Everybody had lost weight, which is what they thought would happen. But the surprising part was people were making better food choices for themselves as the time went on. So if you start to understand your microbes and you feed them, your taste buds will change. So that's why number 3 is feed your microbes, not your taste buds. And ultimately, you're not depriving your taste buds, you're just bringing the microbes into the selection. Like whenever we go out to eat, what do we say? We're like, what are you in the mood for? that's like, we should go, what are your microbes needing right now? It's a really interesting twist when you start to think about it. Okay, number 4 is protein is definitely the hero macronutrient. It is the hero macronutrient of the moment. Put protein with every meal. Absolutely agree with that. And then the last one is fat doesn't make you fat. We got to make sure we're doing the right fat. We're not just avoiding all fat. Most people can follow those 5. I didn't say count anything. I give if you want to count, I give here's some carb loads, here's some protein loads. But if you walk around and you follow those 5 principles, you will never metabolically stray again.
Let's go deeper into the protein piece, bringing in your specific diet. And when you break your fast, and we're not talking about a longer fast here, just your regular intermittent fast, how much protein will you include in that first meal? And then you mentioned protein at every meal. Talk about the spread throughout that eating window and what your goal is. How much are you trying to get within a day?
So this is really interesting because I have my own personal experience. I've seen the research, and we have thousands of women that we have done this with. And here's what I have come to this conclusion. Yes, the science is impressive, and we should be getting 30 grams of protein, especially in that first meal. And we now know that we can go up to 100 grams of protein post-recovery. We're getting a lot of new information about the amount of protein we should have in a meal. So when I break a fast, I really like to try to get that 30 grams. Now, having said that, I did an experiment on myself this year where I tried every day as a 55-year-old woman. I tried every single day to have 1 gram of protein for every pound of ideal body weight. And I was lifting really heavy weights at the time. And much of that protein was being eaten before my weight workout, before I would go to the gym. So I was following all the principles. I put on weight, not just muscle. I put on fat. It was too much protein for me. I needed to cut it back in order to find my pattern with it. So that's why when I wrote Eat Like a Girl, and then I rolled that out to my Reset Academy, and I asked people, let's try it for a month. We're all going to do 1 gram of protein for every pound of ideal body weight. Let's see what the experience was. And it was mixed. Some women were like, yes, I'm definitely gaining muscle and I'm losing weight. And some women were like, I'm gaining weight left and right. Now, much of my audience is women in late perimenopause and women that are postmenopausal. So I think we need to take this protein conversation. We need to understand if it matters where you are along that menopausal journey. We don't have the research on that yet that I have found. So be your own N of 1. You're going to have to find the right rhythm for you. But you can take the science, you can take a podcast like this and you can go, oh, that's really interesting. Okay, now let me practice it and see what works for me. The 1 gram of protein every day didn't work for me. But I've just pared it down. I took it down not so much, and that worked for me.
But you still like to hit the 30 grams for the first meal. I like the 30.
Yeah, I think it's good.
And what would 30 grams look like? Are you getting that purely from food? Are you taking a protein supplement?
Well, so I've done it in a smoothie. I can tell you that my protein powder has 14 grams of protein in it. So I got to do two scoops in there. I have my apprehension around us leaning into protein powders because they're not the true source. They're not the original source. They have been modified to be in this powder, and I'm just more of a purist. I want to come to the original source. The second thing that I really have gone into that I love is cottage cheese. Super easy to eat. I do dairy. I do it organic. 1 cup of cottage cheese has around 20 grams of protein. So I do about 1.5 cups. Super easy to eat and on the go. Really great as compared to eggs. I love eggs. But you need about 6 eggs to be able to get over that 30 gram protein mark. The other thing that I like is chicken. Chicken, it can be really good. About 7 ounces of chicken is going to hit that 30 grams of protein. So sometimes I'll do a chicken breast, or I'll do like rolled up turkey meat I just look on the package. I'm like, how much is in one slice? And then I calculate how many slices that I need. So I will do that at the first meal. And in Eat Like a Girl, we have a whole chart on the different amounts of protein and different sizes of protein, both plant-based and omnivore. Because there's like hemp seeds. Hemp seeds have a lot of protein in it. Quinoa has a lot of protein in it. So you can put a meal together with plant proteins and animal proteins, and you can get up to that 30-gram mark pretty quick.
To get into more detail here, I assume when you're shooting for that 30 grams, you're aiming for stimulating muscle protein synthesis, which under that, we need to hit a certain leucine threshold.
That's right.
Which, when you bring in different protein sources, certain ones are going to be better in leucine than others. Is the MPS the reason you're aiming for that 30 grams? And then talk about what that is, and then the leucine piece of that.
Here's what I want to do. Let's talk about it from a clinical level, and then I want to talk about it from a practical level. Because this protein conversation has really taken over the cultural zeitgeist right now. And everything you're saying is absolutely accurate. You want that 30 grams of protein so that you can start to get that muscle synthesis, and you need it to be leucine-rich proteins. I, again, put tons of lists of leucine and amounts in the book so people could go down that road. But now let's make it practical. The single mom, she's got a lunch break that she has 10, 20 minutes where she just wants to eat whatever she can eat. I just want her to think protein. Get the protein in your body. If she's now like, did I get 30 grams? Was it leucine rich? That starts to become hurdles. And I want to go back to what you said at the beginning of this podcast, is it's gotten very complicated in the nutritional and health world. These are important discussions to have. We should know about leucine. We should know about 30 grams. And then what I really want to know is how do you want to fit that into your life so you can succeed at getting protein in, which is why I said, get it protein with every meal, because that's easy to follow. Now, if you want to take it one step further, yes, make it a leucine-rich protein. Yes, make it 30 grams or more if you really want to go into it. But let's set everybody up for success in knowing protein is the hero macronutrient. We've ignored protein. Let's bring it back. I'm so happy we're having the conversation, but don't lose your vision on the amounts or the types and get worn down by that. I want to just make sure you're getting protein in.
Makes sense. And the other layer to this too, which you mentioned, resistance training is another stimulus for MPS. So it's not all dietary, it's also the actual stimulus to the muscle causing an effect with MPS.
Yeah. And so it's there's the information of what we're talking about, and then there's the application. So if I'm like sitting down and I'm like, I'm really going to, like, this is what I did at the beginning of this year. I was like, I'm going to really focus on muscle. I'm going to take all the principles of muscle and I'm going to play with them. Then conversations like this become really helpful. Yeah, get the leucine. Yeah, make it 30 grams or more. The post-recovery study that came out this year that was like, you could go up to 100 grams of protein after the workout. Great. Do that if you want to move into, like you said, the MPS and be able to like stimulate this muscle synthesis, protein synthesis that's happening. But if you're just trying to get around throughout the day and you want your metabolic health to be great, you want your menopausal symptoms to be better, you want your hormones to be balanced, just make sure you're getting protein with every meal.
Earlier in the conversation, you talked about the importance of insulin sensitivity. At that time, you talked about fasting being a tool. Resistance training and putting on muscle is another way to become more insulin sensitive.
Yep.
Let's round that out and talk about other tools or ways of increasing that and becoming more metabolically healthy.
Using workouts as well?
Any ways that we can Basically, let's give people a list of ways of becoming more insulin sensitive. Other than fasting and putting on muscle. Those are two good ways there.
Got it. Okay. Oh, this is fun. I did in the book, in Eat Like a Girl, I did a checklist because so many people are like, I'm doing all the right things. Why am I not losing weight? So I created a checklist. So I'll go through some of the checklists right now. The first one is a really fun one, which is eat only in the light. So when it's dark out, melatonin goes up. And when melatonin goes up, your cells become more insulin resistant. So that the pasta dinner that you want to eat at 9 o'clock in the dark, and if you eat that pasta dinner at 5 o'clock, you're actually going to your cells are going to be able to take that in better than if you ate it at 9 o'clock. Because your cells, as melatonin comes in, it gets time for bed, they become more insulin resistant. This is why all the night eaters, like, I can't help my night eating. I'm like, if you want to know timing of food, just eat in the light when melatonin's not around. So that's one. My other favorite one, not food related, is when cortisol comes in, you want to move. So cortisol is a hormone that is meant to make you move away from the stimulus, move away from the stressor. So when cortisol comes in, you want to make sure that you're moving. So the worst thing you can do is be sitting in your office, have somebody come into your office, deliver you some terrible news, and then you stay sitting. Get up and use that cortisol. Move with that cortisol. I did during the pandemic. You should have seen me. I was like walking circles around my neighborhood. Every time I had a stressful thought, I put on my shoes and I would just do literally one circle around the block because I was like, I don't want this cortisol to sit in my body. I want to use it. It's meant for movement. So that would be another really interesting one. The third one that this behavior gets a lot of press, but I don't think we think of it in terms of insulin sensitivity. But one of your best tools for burning fat is sleeping. Are you prioritizing sleep? So like I remember with patients all the time that they would be like, well, I can't lose weight. But then when you break it down and you look at their sleep, they're like getting 5-6 hours of sleep a night. I'm like, there's no way your body can burn fat and operate off of this 5 or 6 hours. You're going to have to prioritize sleep in order for that, your body to be able to release all of, repair itself while you're sleeping, just like fasting. And then, the list, we go on toxins. Make sure you're not those obesogens. I had a whole list of obesogens in Eat Like a Girl where I talk about these are the chemicals that are taking your stem cells and they are literally reprogramming them to make fat cells. So get off the toxins because these obesogens are literally making you fat without you doing anything different. They have reprogrammed your cells and now they're making fat cells. There's some really interesting research coming out of England right now that the size of children, the height size of children is shrinking. Meanwhile, the weight size is increasing. So I dove into a couple of studies on obesogens. I quote them all in the new book. But what I found is that there are certain obesogens that take the stem cells in children that were meant to make bone cells and it reprograms it to make a fat cell. So now you have this obesity epidemic going on in children because of the chemicals that we're exposed to, not just in our food, but in our beauty products and all of that. And they've changed this marvelous thing called a stem cell and they have it making a fat cell. So get off the toxins, know your obesogens, get off of that stuff. And then the last one I'll say for the sake of this conversation that I really think needs to be emphasized is you cannot become insulin sensitive if you are in a chronic stress state. Because the nature of stress, when cortisol comes in, is the body's like, okay, we need to get away from the tiger. So it purposely keeps glucose and blood sugar in the system so that you have glucose for the muscles to be able to run. So you're sitting on your couch, or let's use the younger generation right now. They're sitting on their couch. They bring up their phone, they go onto Instagram, they see all the things that they're not doing and all the ways they're not good enough. The cortisol is going up. They're making themselves more insulin resistant, and they haven't even gotten off the couch or put anything in their mouth. So stress absolutely will shut down your body's ability to be insulin sensitive.
In the new book, you have a small section talking about oxytocin being this reset balancer of other hormones, being basically at the top of the cascade and calming down sex hormones, cortisol. So talk more about what oxytocin is and then ways we can boost that.
Yeah, I love this, and I love where you're putting it in the conversation. So thank you for that. I think we need to bring oxytocin back. I think human health would massively improve if we understood the power of oxytocin. So in every book I've written, I write about something called the hormonal hierarchy. And the whole hormonal hierarchy is that hormones don't all have the same influence on our body. So the bottom of the hierarchy are these sex hormones. So estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. If you want to balance those hormones, the hormone you want to pay attention to is insulin. Get yourself insulin sensitive, and those hormones will all balance. An interesting example of this is PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. It is one of the biggest hormonal challenges for women, and it has an insulin resistant piece to it. If you get yourself insulin sensitive, you start to bring that testosterone load down. You start to balance those hormones. Same thing with infertility. We saw a lot of women got pregnant with using the principles of the fasting cycle in Fast Like a Girl, because we really worked on bringing insulin down. So now those sex hormones balance. Above insulin is cortisol. So it's just what I just said. You can't balance insulin if cortisol is hanging around all the time. So get yourself out of these cortisol-rich states. And for some women specifically, this means you need to go handle some trauma. You might need to go and work on some things from the past that are bubbling up to the surface right now. It might mean you need to change a job. You might need to get out of a really stressful situation, but cortisol-rich environment is absolutely going to make you insulin resistant. But at the top of the master hormone is oxytocin. So this fascinates me, because oxytocin is the hormone of connection. And what we have in our world right now is a lot of disconnection mixed with a lot of toxicity and mixed with a metabolic challenge. So we can start to apply all the principles that you and I have been talking about today to improve our metabolic health, but we cannot leave out of the conversation how important it is to pause and to have positive connections in our life, to smile at people. If you're in the grocery store in line, if you're out shopping somewhere, how many times do you just ask the person that's helping you, how was your day? How are you doing today? Thank you for helping me. You don't have to have a ton of friends to get connection. You can smile at people. You can be grateful to people. You can hang out around positive environments and get it. You can get oxytocin from your animals. You can get oxytocin. You can give it to yourself by hugging yourself. There are lots of ways to get oxytocin, but it starts by understanding the importance of it. So this is why we try to create community in my online world, in my Reset Academy all the time. We do community events, we do gratitude challenge. I'm always trying to bring people together to lift each other up. This is why oh my God, let's go back, Jesse, to the first part of this conversation in the health world. Not only are we confusing people, but now we're pointing fingers at everybody saying, you're right, you're wrong. We're pitting people against each other. This is not health. Health starts with oxytocin. Health starts with caring about other humans. Health starts about smiling and saying thank you and saying nice things to yourself. You start there and all other hormones are going to balance. But we have left oxytocin out of the health conversation, and we got to bring it back in. We got to bring more joy, more love, more gratitude, more grace for each other. We have to be willing to sit with somebody who doesn't agree with us and still love them anyways, not cut them out of our life because maybe they're going to vote for somebody different than we were going to vote for, or maybe they think different than we think. The more divisive we become, the more cortisol goes up, the more insulin resistant we become, the more hormone imbalances we have. So we are going to have to learn how to connect with one of each other and start to say nice things, whether we like each other or not. We have to learn to bring the smile back. We have to learn to bring laughter back. And now everything else will balance itself up, itself out. That's how powerful oxytocin is.
I love this. One of the challenges with something like this and adopting it within a healthy routine is the fact that it is so subjective. You can get to the end of your day, you can journal about all the foods you ate, when you exercised, when you broke your fast. There's a lot, what supplements, we could go on and on. There's a lot of objectives that are easy to check off a list and to make sure we're doing on a regular basis. This is a more soft, more nuanced approach to health and wellness. And it's hard to really determine when you deserve that check mark for the day, which makes it, I think, not that it takes away the importance. This is hugely important, but it makes it hard as something you're going to adopt.
Yeah, because it feels less tangible, is what I'm hearing you say.
That's part of it. Yeah, it's less tangible and it's hard to quantify, which I guess is the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's hard to quantify, but I guess I would flip it and ask yourself this. If you're doing all the right things for your metabolic health and you're not getting a result, then try kindness, try connection, try moving into a state of love and appreciation, gratitude, and now see if all those things work. So, you might have to go at it as your last resort, which wouldn't be my first choice. But to your point, if you can't, if it's hard to quantify, then that might be a different way of approaching it.
To bring it into an objective lens, is there any food supplements, and not to take away from what you said, that part is core and foundational. We need to do that, but things we can ingest or do to raise oxytocin along with living the way you described?
So it's a really good question. And I brought Dr. William Li onto my podcast, and we geeked out on two microbe strains. One is called Lactobacillus reuteri, and the other one is called Lactobacillus rhamnosus. And literally in the middle of the interview, I asked him, I was like, I think these two break down estrogen. I can't find any research on it. And he goes and he tries to, he starts Googling it. And we're now having this real-time conversation about these two strains of bacteria. And what he says in that moment to me is he's like, well, what I can tell you is that I know that those two strains of bacteria stimulate oxytocin production. In the gut, it climbs up the vagus nerve and goes up into the brain. So it has, like, the microbes have this stimulatory effect to oxytocin. So you get this oxytocin-rich experience in your brain. So now the two of us are like on Google trying to figure out what foods. And here's what couple that we came up with. Fermented yogurt. But it has to be fermented. It can't be like, you have to make sure some of the pasteurized yogurt, like you might have to make your own fermented yogurt because some of the pasteurized is dead food. So I know William Davis years ago had a recipe that was going around the internet. Do you remember that? It was like an L-reuteri yogurt.
Yeah, no, he's been on the show a couple times talking about that yogurt. And I thought I had a connection there to oxytocin. So I'm glad we came full circle with that.
You know what the other one was that Dr. Lee and I unpacked in this interview? You can go listen to the interview on my podcast, was fermented sourdough bread. So it's really interesting, but those two strains of bacteria affect oxytocin as far as what I know right now. And those are the two foods that I know can upregulate those strains of bacteria so we get more oxytocin in the brain. But it leaves us with the conversation of, well, are there other foods? And now I'm going to need to go search that even more.
Nice. We've talked about metabolic health, insulin resistance, got into a lot of detail there. A couple of times these semaglutide, Ozempic type drugs have come up in the conversation. And they've had a ton of momentum for people losing weight. And again, we've talked about the GLP-1 aspect and being an agonist to that. For somebody that's on the fence right now, thinking about going on to one of these, talk about why they want to think twice and what are some of the negative effects.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I want to say is please try a fasting lifestyle first, because every single person who has succeeded at those weight loss drugs will say, I'm just not hungry. Well, a fasting lifestyle where you have the eating window and the fasting window will do the same. It's very similar. So try that first. Okay. And I'm always try lifestyle first, medication, when the lifestyle isn't getting you the result you want. So whereas in our country, we do the medication and we forget to tell you about the lifestyle. So just want to point that out. My second concern is the cost of these drugs that I think needs to be pointed out. Now, I know some people can get prescriptions for them and they don't have to pay as much. But again, if we're going to change the metabolic health of the world, it needs to be a free tool. And that's why I'm such a fan of fasting, because it's a free tool that can get the same, you just need to learn and you can get the same result. Okay, third thing that I want to point out about these drugs is that there is, and this applies to all the exogenous conversation we've had today about ketones, exogenous ketones, and all of that. When you take something from the outside in and it gives you a result, let's call her your internal badass, doesn't rear her head and go, yeah, look what I did for myself. There is no self-pride, self-confidence, self-certainty that happens when you inject yourself and the weight falls off. Now, you may feel more self-confident because you're dropping weight, but as far as look at what I did for myself, that you miss that whole experience. I'm here in Italy on vacation, and I went into a cafe this morning and I sat down and the woman next to me goes, oh my God, are you Dr. Mindy? I watch all your videos, I read all your books. And then she's like, I have to tell you. And she was so excited. She's like, I followed everything you told me to do, and I lost 15 pounds. And we were literally in this cafe, small little cafe in Positano, high-fiving each other. She was so proud of herself. You don't get that as much with those drugs. And then, yes, we have to think about the muscle loss. I know there's a lot of mixed, bags on that. So, that's a concern. The nausea, that's a concern. So if there wasn't another tool like a fasting lifestyle, then this conversation might look different. It might be like, holy cow, this is a hero medication we need to rethink about. But the tool of a fasting lifestyle, I have seen people literally lose hundreds of pounds, change their cravings, and improve their own health, and they get the win. The medication doesn't get the win, and it's free. So you're asking somebody who's so passionate about the free alternative to Ozempic. And it's very difficult for me to understand why you would pay $800 to $1,000 unless your life was on the line. And you were like, I just got to do something to make sure that I don't die. Then maybe we would be having a different conversation.
I hear you. That makes a lot of sense. And not to discount from that piece of having that sense of accomplishment and that win, there's kind of an in-between that a lot of people in our world are talking about, allulose being a natural sweetener that impacts GLP-1 as an agonist and helps block blood sugar spikes as well. Have you heard a lot about that? Is that something you play with? And again, it's kind of an in-between of a tool like Ozempic, but obviously not as strong, not a drug, but not the same as doing it all on your own.
So this is the way I look at this conversation. I like to see the trend of the culture. So we've gone from sort of ignoring the obesity challenge to really being like, oh, we have a metabolic problem and an obesity problem that's worldwide. From there, we went into, oh, we have a medication that can help everybody lose weight. It's the first time we've ever seen a weight loss drug like this work so well. Now the conversation's evolved to, well, how is that working so well? Oh, there's this thing called the GLP-1 like hormone, and now we're like, oh, but wait, we make that in our gut? To, oh, wait, if we make it in our body, is there any way that we can eat something, drink something, do something to stimulate it? And that is where we are sitting today, which is great. It's a great evolution of the conversation. And we don't know enough yet. I think people like you and me will continue to try to pull out all the different pieces. Like I've heard things like yerba mate tea upregulates GLP-1. I heard recently the order in which you eat your food. Eat your vegetables first, then your protein, then your carbs, and that increases GLP-1. So I think the exciting piece of what's happening with those weight loss drugs is now people are realizing they make this within their own body. So now what are all the strategies they can do to make it? And what can they do to prevent killing it, like we talked about the bad fats? So I think time will tell, and we'll come up with a big, long list. Maybe in a year from now, invite me back and we'll come up with a big, long list together. But I think we're moving in that direction, and that feels healthy and a smart conversation to have.
Good news to wrap up on: the fact that your favorite tool, fasting, is free, something people can take on today. And then I would say your other big tool is diet, and you talked about all your principles. Those two together are so powerful, something people, again, can take on today, and they can take them on in whatever level they want. I mean, they can start with a 12-hour fasting window and then work their way down and tighten that up over time as they start to see success. They can start to remove processed foods and make different dietary changes as they're getting these wins and they're losing body fat and feeling better and getting more energy. So I don't want to distract from the power of these fundamental tools that you and I are both big advocates for. But I think it's important that we went into the details of the drugs, the in-between supplements or sugar that's can be used kind of like a supplement and everything in between. But again, the good news is within this conversation, within your books, everything we're putting out, people can start right away. And it's simple in its most fundamental strategy. And then we can get into the details from there. And people just need to begin with where they're ready to start. You can do it.
1,000% agree. And, I thank you for seeing that, because this is like, I'm standing back and watching all the success that people are having with a fasting lifestyle, and then watching all these side conversations that are going on. And my question has been to many people lately is, are you more confused than ever? Which is why I think it's so interesting that you sort of started this whole podcast with that. It's like, if you're feeling more confused than ever, then let's just come back to some basic principles, like these 5 foundational food ideas and learning how to fast. And you will see so much change in your health just from those 2. So I'm 1,000% in alignment with you on that statement. We have got to uncomplicate this for people.
And if there is one of the tools, say it's allulose or something else we brought up that's more detailed, maybe that can be the catalyst for the right person to bring that on board with what we're talking about.
That's right.
To give them that edge to get things rolling. So that's why it's important to cover these different things, because different ones are going to resonate with different people. And we want to give people the full array of options, because different ones are going to be better choices depending on people's situation, whether it be finances, accessibility, whatever it is. But we're putting it out there. It's in your hands now. We're rooting for you. We're confident in you. It's time to go get the work done.
I love that. And I always say I'm cheering you on. Like, don't give up on yourself. Don't give up on your body. You were born in a miracle. Listening to podcasts like this helps you understand that miracle. And I absolutely agree with you, Jessie. Like, if the allulose, if the exogenous ketones, if the yerba mate tea, like if all those little hacks give you a little more momentum, you're going to find the motivation to keep doing more and more and more. And 1,000%, we're both cheering you on. Don't give up on yourself, because you were more powerful than you've been taught. And that's what I'm hoping in books that I write and conversations like this, is that you will tap into that power.
Definitely. You got this. Mindy, really enjoy the conversation. We're going to link up the new book, social media, your YouTube channel, everything in the show notes. Thank you. I'm sure we'll do this again.
Yeah, thank you, Jesse.
Now that you're done, you're going to want to stick around here and catch this other incredible episode. You don't want to miss it. I'll see you over there.
Phytosterol levels are significantly increased in people who are taking a statin. And this phytosterol is causing damage and harm that has not been properly investigated. With regards to the